What if the greatest gift you possessed became your biggest curse? This is the extraordinary tale of Timm, a boy whose infectious laughter held a secret power, a power that would draw him into a world of unimaginable wealth and a terrifying bargain. Our story begins with Timm, a young boy whose life had been anything but easy. He had lost his mother, leaving him and his father with little money. Yet, despite these hardships, Timm was always smiling. But this wasn't just any smile. His laughter was truly special. When Timm laughed, an irresistible joy spread, causing everyone around him to erupt in mirth. It was simply impossible to remain serious in his presence. Timm's best friend was Ida, the daughter of the kind town baker. They spent countless hours together. On weekends, Timm would join his father, Hans, at the horse racetrack. Hans, a passionate gambler, loved betting on horses, though he never seemed to win. Despite their constant losses, Hans would always reassure Timm, "One day, we'll have enough money, and we'll dine at the most exclusive restaurant in town." Timm, with unwavering faith, believed him every single time. Then one day, their lives took an unexpected turn. At the bakery, Hans introduced Timm to Lydia, explaining she would be his new partner. Accompanying her was her son, Erwin. From their initial encounter, Timm felt an unsettling premonition, and his fears were soon realized. Lydia and Erwin moved into Timm's home, and Erwin immediately asserted his dominance. In their shared bedroom, on a high shelf, Timm kept a cherished possession, a small cardboard castle his mother had crafted for him as a baby, one of his last tangible memories of her. Erwin, utterly indifferent, snatched the castle, threw it to the floor, and deliberately crushed it underfoot. Timm, heartbroken and furious, lunged at Erwin in a fit of rage. Erwin retaliated, then ran to his mother, feigning tears. Lydia, without a single question, sided with her son. She forced Timm to apologize, then falsely accused him of starting the fight when speaking to Hans. Enraged, Hans scolded Timm, leaving the boy feeling utterly isolated and alone. Seeking solace, Timm later met with Ida, hoping to forget his troubles. He invited her to the cinema, and during the film, something extraordinary occurred. Timm began to laugh loudly and uninhibitedly, and as always, his infectious joy spread like wildfire. Soon, the entire cinema hall was roaring with laughter. Even those unaware of the reason couldn't resist. Yet, in a dimly lit corner, one man remained stone-faced. A well-dressed figure in a suit and dark glasses observed Timm with intense scrutiny. He neither smiled nor laughed. He simply watched. The following day, Timm and his father returned to the racetrack. Hans, feeling a surge of intuition, placed a bet on a horse named Sherlock Holmes. Miraculously, for once, luck was on his side. The horse won. Hans, ecstatic, rushed to collect his prize. But at the counter, a bizarre event unfolded. Instead of a substantial reward, he was handed a single coin. Just one. It defied all logic. Determined not to spoil the moment for Timm, Hans maintained his smile and declared, "A promise is a promise." True to his word, he took Timm to a lavish hotel, eager to finally dine at an expensive restaurant. However, upon their arrival, the receptionist, eyeing their worn, simple clothes, refused them entry. They were turned away. Hans, deeply embarrassed, feigned cheerfulness to spare Timm's feelings. In silence, they returned home. Tragedy then struck without warning. While working at a construction site, Hans was involved in a freak accident. A heavy beam unexpectedly shifted and fell, claiming his life instantly. With no savings or property, his funeral was small and modest, lacking even a proper gravestone bearing his name. Timm was shattered. He yearned to place flowers on his father's grave but had no money. As he reached to take flowers from a nearby grave, his stepmother intervened, stopping him. This was the final, crushing blow. Overwhelmed by pain and anger, Timm fled. He ran without a destination, simply walking until, without conscious thought, he found himself back at the racetrack. There, on the ground, he discovered a single coin. Suddenly, the mysterious man from the cinema reappeared. The man calmly instructed Timm to use the coin to place a bet, assuring him that everything was already arranged. He told Timm to bet on a horse named Westwinder. Timm, though uncertain, had nothing left to lose and complied. Incredibly, the horse won. Timm stood in disbelief. As he collected the winnings, tears unexpectedly streamed down his face, not from loss, but from triumph. He had finally achieved his father's lifelong dream, a big win at the racetrack. But his father wasn't there to witness it. As Timm stood, eyes brimming with tears, two peculiar men approached him. They introduced themselves as Behemoth and Bile, acting friendly and offering comfort. They advised him to hide the money securely to prevent theft. Behemoth even demonstrated how to wrap the cash in a handkerchief and tuck it into his coat pocket. Later, Timm encountered the mysterious man with dark glasses once more. This time, the man's demeanor was stern. He informed Timm that he had already lost all his money. Timm frantically checked his handkerchief, only to be horrified. The cash was gone, replaced by mere scraps of newspaper. He realized Behemoth and Bile had deceived him. Undeterred, the mysterious man introduced himself as Baron Leaf, the richest man in the world. He calmly handed Timm another coin and urged him to try again. The next day, Timm returned to the racetrack, but arriving too early, he dozed off on a bench. This presented Behemoth and Bile with a golden opportunity. They silently stole his last coin. A few minutes later, Timm awoke to find Baron Leaf once more before him. The Baron urged him to hurry, as betting time was nearly over. But there was a critical problem. Timm couldn't find his coin. Without it, he had no means to place a bet and reclaim his money. It was then that the Baron made an astonishing offer. He promised Timm that he could ensure Timm would never lose another bet for the rest of his life. In exchange, Timm had to surrender something incredibly precious. Initially, Timm thought the Baron was jesting, but then the Baron produced an official contract. He promised Timm that if he signed it, he would never again have to worry about money. Timm hesitated, but ultimately, he signed the contract. The moment he did, an irreversible change occurred. Timm's face became utterly serious. He could no longer smile. As the contract stipulated, he placed a bet, chose the winning horse, and collected the prize money. Yet, his face showed no happiness, no smile, no laughter. Timm, wondering if it was all a cruel illusion, used his newfound winnings to invite Ida to the cinema once more. During the film, everyone in the theater roared with laughter, enjoying the show. Everyone except Timm. He sat in silence, completely devoid of reaction. Meanwhile, Baron Leaf returned to his office, brimming with satisfaction. It was then that the chilling truth was unveiled. Behemoth and Bile were his subordinates, never intending to help Timm. The Baron instructed them to monitor Timm closely, as he intended to harness the boy's extraordinary luck for his own schemes. There was one minor issue, however. Timm might recognize them. So, with a flick of his wrist, the Baron used his magic to transform them into mice, allowing them to remain near Timm unnoticed. At the cinema, Ida sensed something was profoundly wrong with Timm. He was behaving entirely differently. She questioned him about what had happened, but Timm evaded her inquiries, instead buying her a handful of colorful balloons to deflect the conversation. Ida, her curiosity piqued, asked where he had acquired the money. Unwilling to reveal the truth about his dark bargain, Timm concocted a bizarre lie. He claimed to have stolen the money from the city senator. It sounded utterly preposterous, yet Timm's unyielding, serious expression lent it an air of credibility. Ida believed him. She rushed back to the bakery to tell her mother. Unfortunately, a customer overheard their conversation, and soon the rumor that Timm had robbed the senator swept through the entire city. By the time Timm reached home, his stepmother was already aware. Erwin searched Timm's coat and found the money. Lydia, enraged, threatened to punish him. Just then, Ida's mother arrived, clarifying the situation. She explained that Timm had stolen nothing. Shortly thereafter, the police confirmed that no robbery had occurred. Timm then confessed that he had obtained the money by betting on horse races. With the truth finally revealed, Lydia forgave him, but promptly decided to keep all the money for herself. Even after the misunderstanding was cleared, Timm felt wounded that Ida had believed the rumor and spread it. Consequently, they stopped speaking. Feeling a profound sadness but compelled to utilize his new luck, Timm began playing marbles with the boys at school, placing bets with them. As always, he won every single game. However, instead of being impressed, The other boys suspected him of cheating. Gradually, they all began to distance themselves from him. The situation grew even more strained when Ida, hoping to apologize, brought a cake to Tim's house one day. Sadly, she was met only by Lydia and Erwin. They devoured the entire cake themselves, never mentioning Ida's visit to Tim. Following this incident, Lydia began to find Tim's consistent winning highly peculiar. She decided to take both Tim and Erwin to the racetrack to witness it firsthand. At the track, she instructed Tim to choose a horse. He did, and the horse won. Lydia was stunned. She quickly snatched the winnings, eager to leave before any misfortune struck, but Erwin urged Tim to bet again. Tim, suggesting they could win even more next time, convinced Lydia. The second race began, but this time Tim's horse lagged, finishing in fourth place. Lydia and Erwin grew furious, blaming him for their loss. Suddenly, the announcer made an unexpected announcement. The first 3 horses were disqualified, making Tim's horse the winner once more. Everyone was astounded. Without a moment's hesitation, Lydia pocketed the prize money. But for Tim, money no longer held significance. Deep down, he only wished his father were there to see it all. Later, Tim wandered alone through the city, stopping outside the same opulent hotel where his father had once dreamed of dining. A receptionist named Kresimir recognized him, having heard whispers of his incredible luck. Kresimir invited Tim inside and, to test his abilities, challenged him to a card game. Tim agreed, but with one condition. If he won, he wanted a job at the hotel. He longed to earn his own money and escape his stepmother's grasp. Kresimir accepted the deal. At that precise moment, Yvonne, the hotel owner, announced her need for a new elevator operator. Just like that, Tim secured the job. From that moment, he resolved to stop gambling forever. That same night, he left a note for Lydia and Erwin, informing them of his new job and his imminent departure. On his way to the hotel, Tim paused at the bakery and encountered Ida. She rushed to speak with him. Hearing he was moving away, she tried to mend their rift, asking if he had enjoyed the cake she had brought him. Tim, utterly unaware, quickly said he was late for work and left. Ida returned to the bakery in tears, where she found Baron Leaf seated at a table. When she called for her mother, she realized her mother had fallen asleep. The Baron calmly informed Ida that he was aware of her feelings for Tim and could make Tim return, but only if she agreed to a deal. Meanwhile, Tim began his work at the hotel. He discreetly inquired about Baron Leaf among the staff, desperate to find him and reclaim his laughter at any cost, but no one knew the Baron's whereabouts. Soon after, Tim noticed 2 maids carrying a bucket containing 2 rats. These were in fact Behemoth and Bile in disguise, having infiltrated the hotel to spy on him. Yvonne ordered them to be killed immediately, but Tim offered to handle it himself. He took the rats outside and, instead of harming them, set them free. This unexpected act of kindness profoundly surprised Behemoth and Bile, leading them to question their allegiance to the Baron. Back inside, Tim examined his copy of the signed contract. There he discovered a crucial clause. If he ever lost a bet, the contract would be broken, and his laughter would be restored. Seizing this opportunity, Tim approached Kresimir and made another bet. He wagered that Baron Leaf would arrive at the hotel the very next day. Kresimir, though skeptical, agreed to the bet. Mere seconds later, the phone rang, bringing news that the Baron was indeed coming to stay at the hotel. Yvonne swiftly ordered the hotel to prepare a grand welcome party. Soon, the city's wealthiest citizens gathered to meet him. Finally, the Baron arrived, and Tim was the one to escort him up in the elevator. Inside, Tim pleaded with him to cancel the contract, but the Baron merely smiled, explaining that the only way to break it was to lose a bet, an almost impossible feat now, as Tim's luck would never falter. Before exiting the elevator, the Baron removed his dark glasses. It was then that Tim noticed something horrifying. The Baron now possessed bright blue eyes, precisely like Ida's. Tim's blood ran cold. He immediately feared the worst had befallen her. He resolved to rush to the bakery as quickly as possible. To guarantee his swift arrival, he called Kresimir and made another bet, claiming he would reach the bakery in mere minutes. Once again, he won the bet. Tim quickly arrived at the bakery and rushed straight to Ida's room, which was plunged in complete darkness. Ida, overjoyed to see him, declared that her deal with the Baron had worked, and they could now be friends again. But something felt profoundly wrong. Timm noticed that Ida's eyes were now a strange yellow color, and she could only see in the dark. It was then that Timm grasped the horrifying truth. The Baron had stolen Ida's real eyes for himself. Timm promised her he would fix everything. He extended his hand, and when Ida clasped it, she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her eyes. Just like that, her normal vision returned. Simultaneously, back at the hotel, the Baron was about to deliver a speech when he was struck by a blinding headache. Behemoth and Bile rushed to his side, realizing he had gone completely blind. The only person who could have caused this was Timm. At the bakery, Ida was ecstatic to see again, hugging Timm tightly. Yet, Timm remained unable to smile. He rushed back to the hotel to confront the Baron, but upon his arrival, the Baron and all the guests had vanished. Later, Kresimir spoke with Timm, remarking on the strangeness of someone so perpetually sad winning every bet. It was then that Timm finally divulged everything: the contract, the loss of his laughter, and how the only way to break the deal was to lose a bet. Kresimir pondered deeply, and later that night, he approached Timm with an idea. He suggested Timm make a bet, claiming he was richer than the richest man in the world. This, Kresimir reasoned, would be a lie, and Timm would finally lose. Timm agreed, but when they placed the bet, nothing happened. His luck remained unbroken. Even so, Timm thanked him and went to sleep. Meanwhile, Kresimir continued to obsess over the contract. He wrote the Baron's name on a handkerchief and observed its reflection in a bottle. That's when he noticed something unsettling. The name Lefut, when read backward, resembled a German word meaning devil. This discovery filled him with dread. Soon after, the hotel suddenly lost power. When the lights flickered back on, Kresimir took the elevator to find Ivan. But another blackout occurred, trapping him inside. Suddenly, his reflection began to vanish from the mirror, and a dark shadow attacked him. At the same time, Timm was awakened in his room by security guards bearing shocking news. Baron Lefut had died during the night and named Timm as his sole heir. Ivan attempted to intervene, but then she discovered Kresimir unconscious inside the elevator and rushed to his aid. A few hours later, Timm was taken to the Baron's mansion, where a lavish room awaited him. Confused and exhausted, Timm fell asleep. The next morning, he walked into the main hall and came face to face with the Baron, very much alive. The Baron revealed that he had faked his death, pretending to be his own twin brother. By bequeathing all his wealth to Timm, he had inadvertently made Timm the richest person in the world, meaning Timm had unknowingly won the bet he made with Kresimir. The Baron then unveiled his true nature. He was not merely a rich man, but a malevolent entity who forged deals with people. He granted them their desires in exchange for what they cherished most. With helpers scattered across the globe, he secretly orchestrated problems in people's lives, solely to later exploit their desperation through deals and profit from their misery. Upon hearing the truth, Timm refused to keep the Baron's money. He demanded his laughter be returned, but the Baron simply reminded him of the contract. Then, without warning, he stepped into a mirror and vanished through a strange portal, returning to his secret company. There, he met with Behemoth and Bile, informing them that Timm now resided in his mansion, and so, his true plan began. The Baron intended for Timm to continue gambling, again and again, for with every bet Timm made, he would slowly lose a piece of his soul. Once his soul was completely gone, Timm would become the Baron's successor. To set this plan in motion, the Baron arranged for Lydia and Erwin to visit Timm. As soon as they arrived, they began badgering him for help to earn more money. Influenced by the Baron and still harboring anger towards them, Timm decided to wield his luck for revenge. He placed bets designed to force Lydia and Erwin out of the mansion. He even contemplated a bet that would unleash a swarm of bees upon them. This delighted the Baron, who encouraged Timm to continue punishing them. Just in time, Timm reined himself in. A flicker of kindness remained in his heart, and he refused to risk anyone's life. The Baron then warned him that if he truly wished to protect people, he must distance himself from them, especially from those he loved most, like Ida, even if it caused him deep pain. Timm reluctantly agreed. Soon after, Ida read in the newspaper about a boy who had become the richest person in the world. She decided to visit the mansion to see Timm. When they met, Timm acted cold and distant. He claimed he only wanted to make a bet with her to help Kresimir recover. Ida agreed, and when they shook hands, back at the hotel, Kresimir suddenly awoke. After that, Timm coldly told Ida to leave, stating he no longer needed her friendship and was better off living alone in his luxurious mansion. His words deeply wounded Ida. She departed in tears, while the Baron watched everything with a satisfied smile, pleased to see Timm growing increasingly isolated. Next, the Baron announced a grand betting championship in Timm's name. Posters were plastered across the city, proclaiming that all proceeds would be donated to orphan children. The following day, the entire town gathered at the racetrack. A choir of orphan children even sang for Timm, thanking him for his supposed kindness. But in truth, this was all part of the Baron's elaborate scheme to ensnare Timm deeper into gambling. During the event, the Baron observed an orphan boy whose laughter was as potent as Timm's once was. He suggested Timm make a bet with the boy, taking his laughter. That way, Timm could smile again, and the Baron would secure a new future successor. With his soul nearly ensnared, Timm was on the verge of accepting. Unknown to the Baron, however, Ida and Kresimir had also arrived. When Ida spotted Timm on stage, she tried to reach him, but Behemoth and Bile intercepted her. She pleaded with them for help, explaining that Timm was under the Baron's control. This plea reminded Bile of the moment Timm had spared his life. For the first time, Bile resolved to defy his master. He convinced Behemoth to join him. Seizing a moment when the Baron was distracted, they secretly led Timm beneath the stage, where he was finally reunited with Ida and Kresimir. Ida revealed to Timm that she now knew everything about the contract. She then devised a clever plan. She proposed a new bet. Ida wagered that Timm was unable to smile, and she was willing to bet that he actually could. If Timm accepted this bet, his inherent luck would compel him to win, meaning he would smile again and thus break the contract. But Timm hesitated. His soul was almost entirely consumed, and his desire for power was beginning to dominate him. Simultaneously, the Baron realized Timm had vanished. Furious, he commanded everyone to find him, his anger manifesting as a colossal storm swirling around the racetrack. Hearing the Baron's booming voice, Timm felt himself being drawn back, but Ida refused to surrender. She reminded Timm of an old joke they had shared, and laughed at as children. That cherished memory stirred his heart. Slowly, Timm began to regain his senses. Ida offered the bet again. Just as Timm was about to respond, the Baron suddenly appeared, ordering him to return. But this time, things were different. Thanks to Ida, Timm managed to resist the Baron's control. He accepted the bet. A powerful force erupted, pushing the Baron back. The storm dissipated, and the contract finally shattered. Timm was free. He embraced Ida, and for the first time in a very long time, he truly smiled again. Together with Ida and Kresimir, Timm left the racetrack. On their way, they saw the Baron one last time. He now appeared ancient and frail. He tried to tempt them, shedding tears of diamonds, hoping they would make another deal, but Timm refused without a second thought. Soon after, Behemoth and Bile reappeared. They vowed never to serve the Baron again, promising to protect Timm from that moment forward. Realizing his defeat, the Baron turned to leave, but before vanishing, he transformed Behemoth and Bile back into rats once more. In the end, Timm and Ida returned to their humble neighborhood in the bakery, bringing the two rats with them. From that day on, Timm lived there with Ida and her mother, happy once again. He had learned a profound truth. You don't need to be rich to smile, and you don't need money to be truly happy.